The resilience of the Irish Hedge schools, a legacy of defiance and education. The story of Irish Hedge schools is a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. It is a story that stretches far beyond the simple act of teaching children in secret. It's a narrative of cultural defiance, of the Irish people's unwavering commitment to preserving their identity, and of the critical role education played in resisting centuries of oppression. This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been passionate about empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You isn't just a tool. It's a bridge for people to communicate and interact with the world in a meaningful way. By blending historical storytelling with cutting-edge tech, the creator showcases how powerful a voice can be, whether telling your own story or preserving history. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button and help this channel grow. Now back to the story. Picture the Irish countryside in the 18th century. Vast green fields, rolling hills, and scattered clusters of homes. The air is filled with the smell of damp earth and the sounds of nature, but beneath this peaceful exterior, a quiet battle is being waged. The British penal laws have stripped Catholics of their rights, outlawing not only their religious practices, but also their access to education. Denied the right to learn, Irish children face the very real threat of growing up in ignorance, cut off from their cultural roots, unable to advance in society, and left vulnerable to further exploitation. But the Irish would not surrender so easily. From the very beginning, education was deeply embedded in the fabric of Irish society, dating back to ancient times when Ireland was known for its monastic schools that attracted scholars from across Europe. To lose education was to lose a vital part of their identity. The people responded with quiet rebellion, and thus the Hedge schools were born. These schools, often held in hidden corners of the countryside, were not just about reading and writing. They were symbols of resistance, courage, and survival. Imagine a small group of children, ranging from young boys and girls to teenagers, gathering in the early morning mist. Their teacher, a man who once might have been a priest or scholar, stands before them, a book in hand, while the children sit on stones or on the grass, eager to learn. The teacher may not be paid much, if anything, for his work, but he is driven by a sense of duty to keep the flame of knowledge alive. The lessons were sometimes simple, basic arithmetic, reading from worn copies of English or Latin texts, but other times they ventured into more complex subjects, Greek classics, ancient history, or even philosophy. The curriculum was often surprisingly advanced, given the conditions. In many cases, children learned far more than their British-educated counterparts, who were restricted to rote memorization and simple skills. An anecdote from a former student tells of one particularly cold winter's day when snow blanketed the ground. Despite the biting wind and the risk of frostbite, the children made their way to the hidden school, their feet wrapped in rags, their cheeks red with cold. The teacher, shivering himself, recited lessons from memory, as ink froze in the inkwells and the children huddled close together for warmth. Despite the hardship, none of the students wanted to leave. Education was too precious to waste, no matter the cost. The hedgerows, which sheltered the children from prying eyes, became symbols of protection. They concealed the school's location and provided a literal and metaphorical barrier between Irish culture and the British authorities, who sought to erase it. The children would hide their books at the sound of approaching footsteps, scattering in all directions if a patrol came near, only to regroup when the coast was clear. In some areas, brave locals kept watch, alerting teachers and students when danger approached. The teachers, too, were heroes in their own right. Often operating under constant threat of arrest, they risked their lives to pass on knowledge. Many of them had been educated in Europe or at secret seminaries, forbidden from teaching in Ireland. With the collapse of formal Catholic institutions, these educators became beacons of hope, ensuring that even under oppression, the Irish intellect and spirit would survive. Beyond the classroom, the lessons of the Hedge schools rippled through the community. Education empowered the students, giving them the tools to rise above their circumstances. It allowed them to preserve their language, their history, and their sense of identity. Hedge schools became breeding grounds for future revolutionaries, poets, and thinkers. Figures like Daniel O'Connell, who would later lead the fight for Catholic emancipation, were shaped by the spirit of defiance they witnessed in their youth. These schools were far more than just a way to teach children to read and write. They were cultural and spiritual sanctuaries. In a world where they were forbidden to practice their faith or speak their language freely, the Irish people turned to education as a way to keep their heritage alive. Through Latin prayers, Irish songs, and stories of ancient heroes, the students were reminded of who they were and where they came from. By the early 19th century, as the British government loosened some of the penal laws and national schools were established, the need for hedge schools began to fade. However, the legacy of the hedge schools would not be forgotten. Many of the students who attended these secret lessons went on to become leaders in the Irish nationalist movement, fighting for the right to be educated in their own language, to practice their own religion, and to govern their own country. Several notable Irish figures were either directly or indirectly linked to the legacy of the hedge schools. Though not all were students of these clandestine institutions, many were deeply influenced by the spirit of resistance and education that the hedge schools embodied. Here are a few famous Irish people connected to the hedge school tradition. 1. Daniel O'Connell, 1775 to 1847. Often referred to as the Liberator, O'Connell was a prominent Irish political leader who campaigned for Catholic emancipation and the repeal of the Act of Union. He attended a hedge school in County Kerry during his early years. O'Connell's advocacy for education was influenced by his own formative experience, and he went on to promote the establishment of schools that offered education to the Catholic population, despite the oppressive laws of the time. 2. John Mitchell, 1815 to 1875. A revolutionary and nationalist, Mitchell was a leading figure in the Young Ireland movement. His early education, including at hedge schools, contributed to his passionate drive to fight for Irish independence. He would later become involved in the 1848 rebellion, and his writings and advocacy for Irish freedom were heavily influenced by the intellectual foundation laid by informal education systems like the hedge schools. 3. Robert Emmet, 1778 to 1803. A key figure in the Irish Rebellion of 1803, Robert Emmet's early education in Ireland, including time spent in hedge schools, instilled in him a sense of nationalism and a desire for independence. His famous speech before his execution is a testament to the ideals of liberty and Irish sovereignty that were fostered in the educational environments that resisted British rule. 4. Padraig Pearse, 1879 to 1916. One of the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising and a key figure in the Irish revolutionary movement, Pearse was deeply committed to the Irish language and culture. Though Pearse himself did not attend hedge schools, he was inspired by the intellectual tradition of resistance and self-education. Pearse founded St. Enda's School in Dublin, which emphasized Irish culture and education in the Irish language, continuing the spirit of the hedge school in a more formal setting. 5. James Connolly, 1868 to 1916. A socialist leader and revolutionary, Connolly was instrumental in the Irish independence movement and the 1916 Easter Rising. Born into a working-class family, he was deeply influenced by self-education and the grassroots educational movements of the time. Although not a hedge school student himself, his radical ideas and commitment to Irish independence were shaped by a broader tradition of resistance and empowerment through education. 6. Theobald Wolfe Tone, 1763 to 1798. A leader of the Irish Rebellion of 1798 and a founding member of the Society of United Irishmen, Tone's early education was influenced by the broader Irish nationalist movement that saw education as key to cultural preservation. Like many others, Tone's worldview was shaped by a desire for freedom and the preservation of Irish heritage, ideas rooted in the hedge school tradition. 7. Saoirse Ronan, 1994. Although Ronan is a modern figure and not directly connected to the hedge schools, her name is worth mentioning in the broader sense of the continued legacy of Irish intellectualism and cultural preservation. As an actress, Ronan represents a modern form of Irish identity that still carries the cultural pride and strength that was nurtured through centuries of resistance, including the hedge schools. These figures, some directly involved in the Hedge schools and others shaped by the spirit of resistance to British rule and the desire for education, are part of a broader narrative that connects the history of the Irish people to the resilience embodied by the Hedge schools. These schools were not only places of learning, but also incubators of rebellion, creativity, and national consciousness. The story of the Hedge schools is a reminder of the power of education to resist tyranny, to inspire hope, and to foster a sense of self-worth. It was a testament to the resilience of the Irish people, who refused to let their culture be erased. The Hedge schools taught more than just letters and numbers. They instilled in generations of Irish children the belief that knowledge was power, that education was worth fighting for, and that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can triumph over oppression. Today, the memory of the Hedge schools serves as an inspiration. They remind us that education is not just about acquiring skills, but about preserving and passing on what is most precious: our values, our history, and our culture. The Hedge schools were a triumph of the human spirit, a victory of mind over might, and a shining example of the transformative power of learning. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za and support this meaningful dyslexic initiative. Thank you for watching.